That is what we're all about. So come join us in the Story Cure. And next up is Dr. Stephanie Cawthon. I am thrilled to have Stephanie here today. Stephanie is our poster child for your best-selling book because she is a fierce and amazing force to be reckoned with. Stephanie is a professor of psychology at the University of Texas, Austin. She is also an incredibly powerful speaker and the author of Disability is Human and an accompanying workbook to go with it that helps bring accessibility into all of our lives every day in every way with a really friendly, empowering tone. And I'm thrilled for her to talk about her book journey. She was in the very first cohort of Your Best-Selling Book in the fall of 2023, and she got her book done and out there in 1 year. And you can too. And Jen and I were so thrilled. We went back for our Stanford reunion this past fall, and we saw Stephanie and her book at the Stanford bookstore. It was a truly high life moment. She has also secured over $26 million in federal funding to support education and employment outcomes of disabled people and has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles. Dr. Stephanie Cawthon, welcome.
Thank you, Mei Mei. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you. It's so exciting.
Well, we are lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you in the course, and we're lucky to have you here today. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about your journey with writing your book.
Sure. I think one thing to frame this a little bit is that, as an academic, writing is very currency. Nobody can take your publications away from you. It is your currency. It's how you get promoted. It's how you get jobs. It's how you get grants. So that has both its positives and negatives. The positive is that you spend a lot of time trying to think about how do you take what you have to say in a way that you're paying attention to your audience quite often. The hard part is that it's currency, it's transactional. And your story, at least in the social sciences that I live in, your story is on the very, very bottom of the list priorities of what to talk about. And academic writing and book writing in this kind of book are very different spaces. And when I first connected with you, Mei Mei, I think I was kind of having a professional crisis. Like we had some one-on-one meetings. This is when you were still planning this out. And I was really trying to figure out, what am I doing? I've hit the midlife thing. COVID is turning everything upside down, and my life as well. And I really needed a place to put things that weren't part of that transactional space. And I mean, it wasn't going to count towards anything merit-based, quote unquote, in my evaluation life, but it needed a lot of energy. Book writing is not something that you do just on the fly. I mean, it really needed a lot of energy and structure. And so I had already sort of committed to, I want to write a book that is for people as opposed to for this transaction, in however that was. And, you're a very therapeutic person. You're formally trained in that. And I am too, but I needed somebody else to sort of connect with that. And so when you said, hey, we're going to be doing this book, I had a pile of notes. I think I at one point, I think I told you it was 60 pages of notes. I had a bunch of little stories, none of my own, which becomes really important down the line, because even the use of I, the pronoun I, is very frowned upon in academic writing. You talk about other people's stories, you evaluate them, you summarize them, you give meaningful insights, you tell people what to do. You do not put yourself into it in any real way. You might say, hey, this is who I am, who's helping to translate or frame this, but you would never start a book with a penny loafer story. You would never start an article with, let me tell you where I grew up and why this topic is important to me. And so that was really where I was looking for sort of the guidance of taking those pages of things and not telling the story necessarily, but it is another permission slip. It was a permission slip to make this not my job. It was a permission slip to say, this book is for something that I need for me, some of it professionally, for sure. I mean, it connects to my speaking, it connects to how I'm out in the world. But it's out in the world in a way that doesn't hang. I even hesitated, do I put the PhD at the end of the little Zoom thing? And I was like, I'll leave that there. That does. But the person who wrote that book is really in conflict about what does that PhD mean in this space. And you helped me figure it out that I don't have to get rid of the PhD to be in this space, but it is sort of like being that person in a different way. So that's kind of the starting point for that journey. And so I'm a type A person who likes to get things done. I knew that I was not going to get this done without a community that was going to help me. I needed somebody. And the universe brings people into your lives when they're meant to be there. And you were that person at that time. And I was even a little nervous. It's like, do you remember me from 25 years ago? Like, it's been a long time, I followed you, but we didn't really know what the other person was other than just, being in that space. And so I really, appreciated the invitation, much as other people have said, like, the invite is as important as the actual doing. And that's been super valuable. So, the course itself really helped sort of say that 5 minutes a day, you better do that 5 minutes a day, because Mei Mei told me to do that 5 minutes a day. And I'm a very good rule follower. And if that's the rule, I'm going to do it. And, of course, the 5 turns into 30, turns into, other things. But it was definitely that sort of like the accountability piece, but not in a like draconian way, just in a, if your expectation is have a book by the end of the thing, these are the steps along the way. And these are the steps that you have seen be successful. And it's not an order, it's a suggestion. We're all adults here, but it's also a very well-founded suggestion. And I think that sort of rhythm really helped me. There was a sense of urgency. I was like, if I let this sit another year, and I don't know why, but that sense of urgency, like I was going to lose my window somehow, like something was going to be lost. And so you helped put some structure around that. Yeah, so the part of how do you tell your own story within a book that is about other people, and disability is not just my story. There are lots of different ways to experience disability, and so I really appreciated the chance to both sort of practice what does it mean to tell my disability story, but also what does it mean to balance that out with other people's disability stories, so it's not just one or the other. And that was a real challenge, like from structural and also content of like, when you're part of the community that you're talking about, but also advocating for, it can't just be your story. And so that is, in terms of what is the impact of the book had a real goal of having an impact out in the world. And I needed some specific things to do that. And you intuitively brought those into light. And some of those things came up naturally within the group, but you intuitively figured out how I could figure that out.
What was it? Can you tell us a little bit about what that was and what your book is and what what its impact has been? Take us to that next step.
Yeah. So you mean the intuitively piece?
Well, tell us what your book is about first. Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah.
Like three,
So the book is really about understanding, we have 1 in 4 people have a disability at any given time. That is the CDC statistic. And we use that in a way to understand that disability manifests in many different ways. And often in ways that people don't realize, oh, that falls under disability. Let me give you an example. People are typically able to recognize, oh, someone using a wheelchair, or for me, deaf and hard of hearing. There are physical things. You may have cerebral palsy. You may have something that typically looks more physical. But we also include under that umbrella, especially in the school world, ADHD, learning disabilities, dyslexia. Anybody who has kids is probably very aware of how that might manifest within, raising kids going through K-12. Autism is certainly within my field of psychology. People are very interested in why that rate has exploded, but has really increased. But then there's also mental health. And as somebody who works in a university setting, I can tell you that the mental health implications, not just of COVID, but of what this cohort is going through, including all of the things with social media. So I was really fascinated by our conversations earlier here, is, we're not 1 in 4, it's like half at some point in time are having a crisis that impacts how they interface with their world. And so the book is really trying to bring this idea of our world is by design. Our schools, our homes, our communities, how we vote, how we go to the gym, how we go to church, how we have families. And by design, they're often inaccessible for disabled people of various different kinds, not necessarily intentionally, but there are things that we can do. And so this book really starts with the idea of helping people step back from the to-do list and bring it back to the why. Why would we want to create a more accessible world? And it really starts with this understanding of what is disability and what is our relationship to disability? because that's going to be very different for each person and evolves over time. And then understanding the implications of that in terms of, again, how our I'll call them societal structures, but that's an academic term. But how is it that our organizations either amplify or create hidden barriers, and sometimes obvious barriers, to having the full range of folks engage in a meaningful way? And so, and then we end with specific strategies for people who are business owners, people who maybe, having a book club and they want to make sure that things are right. I have another, I'm really excited. I have another book signing event at a local bookstore here. And there are a number of accessibility things that have already come up just in how do you hold an event in this space about disability accessibly. And the immunocompromise is one that we now are very aware of that term. And there are things that we now know to do. You bring masks. And I said, well, I can't read lips if there are masks. So we need to bring clear masks. So it's just taking the time to think through the who, the what, and the how in a way that's not scary. It's a gentle invitation. And that's what I think was really missing from when I was looking at the landscape of what's out there, is it tends to be legal compliance. It tends to be don't get sued. And it tends to be kind of an echo chamber of folks talking about web accessibility more than anything. And this tries to broaden it. It's like, this is a mindset. How do we think about flexible spaces as a mindset? And what are some ways to go about that? So that's what the book is about.
It's really powerful. So tell me how getting your book out there, where are you in that journey and what has that been like? Because
in that journey, I went the self-publishing, hybrid publishing route for many things that came. That was something that really helped in the course as well, as to wrestle through that decision. I've done traditional publishing. I'm an editor of a traditional publisher, and I just felt like it was new wine, new wineskins. I mean, it just felt like I needed to try a different approach for this content and this intention. And so went with some of the folks that you interviewed, and it was one of those moments where you were like, I have vetted these folks and these resources. Trust me. And I was like, okay, I'll trust you, Mei Mei. I'll trust you. So went through some of those folks. It was challenging. It was the editing process, the design process, challenging, not in a bad way, but you get in the weeds when you do the self-publishing route. Like you have to make a lot of decisions. You're paying for everything yourself. So you're very much like, where's this money going? It happened, I would say, the full manuscript was in people's hands by May 2024. And we were finally able to get stuff uploaded through all the tech stuff by mid-October. And we had a number of hiccups along the way, so it was not smooth. But I also think that the expectation of any less than 6 months from full manuscript to it's out in the world, I don't see how that would happen without you knowing everything already. And so, that was that. So we really were able to get things launched in the fall. I'm recording the audiobook in 2 weeks. So that is something that's, again, you keep pushing the envelope to learn new things. I'm going to learn how to do an audiobook. So we're definitely still in the rollout beyond my immediate sphere, but had a number of keynotes around it so far. I've had a number of people say, our book club is going to be looking at this as part of our professional development program. And that to me is like I didn't realize that would be so satisfying. Like, to know that there is a group at Johns Hopkins that is going to be using that book as part of their professional development. That there's another person who, for her organization, she bought everyone a copy of the workbook, and I'm looking at it over here. And she said, I couldn't believe they could just pick that up and use it all by themselves. And I was like, that's where the educator comes in. Like, people do have a great capacity to do things. You just need to give them the right tools. Oh.
Can you hold up your books for us and show them to us? Because
yes.
I have them at home on my desk, so I can always show people, but I'm on the road right now. So
can you see book?
There we go. Disability is human.
You wrote the book.
I
don't speak French, but I'll use that. So there we go.
Thank you. I wanted to open it up. I believe Kieran had a question for you.
I always have questions for Stephanie. We had a fortunate ability. I think it was almost a year ago that we were talking on another platform, and I got to hear about all of your work. So one of the things I'm really intrigued with, because I just, getting a historical fiction novel published, and I have waded through so many academic papers. So I mean, I think I lived on the JSTOR site. I still do. And so I understand what you're saying. And so I'm curious about, because story is often, well, not often, fundamentally, it's about perspective. And so when it became I, did that feel freeing? Because, or at the same time, did it feel like you're walking a tightrope without a net? Like, how is that switch creatively for you?
More the latter.
More
Uh,
the
more the latter. I think there's so much wrapped up in the 30 years of they that putting I in a public space, it's going to take a little more time. It's kind of like Twants, like it's really raw. Like even when I tell some of the stories that are in the book to people in a very like private space, it still feels like I'm taking a big risk. Yeah. So I would say it's the freedom space. I maybe this year, maybe next year. I don't know. Yeah.
Tuan
Still
had
feels
his
very
hand
different.
up too. Tuan, do you have a question?
Yay, Stephanie! Woo! First cohort. Woo! You know what? First and foremost, I just want to congratulate you and just love your energy in the course. As a TV kind of like personality person too, we're always taught, like when you're a little kid, no, right? Like, and in your case, like it's not about you. And it isn't, like as a journalist, never insert yourself in a story. You show one side, you show the other side, you let people decide, right? And what was so freeing, I'd love for you to talk about how this was either healing or freeing for you, or were there any ahas or like, oh my God, because your story, your energy matters so much. And I think, as somebody that has people that are disabled, and has, encountered a lot of people or even have had different things come up within my own self in terms of disability things. Like how was that for you? Like how was it healing? Was it revealing? How was that aha for you?
Sure, sure. Thank you for that question, Twan. I think, um, I mean, I'm around students a lot, right? And when I'm teaching or in a classroom, we're on a stage, right? A big stage, small stage, it's a stage. I found myself tapping into the energy that I use when I try to teach. And that I remembered how much I love it. Because now in my life, I do a lot of things that aren't that, just by the nature of my roles and things. Um, that teaching feeds those things, but it isn't those things. Okay. And so I find that when I give a talk or when I'm on a professional development thing or when I'm situated within the book, I get to be that teacher again. And it's the telling of the stories is not unfamiliar. It's just it's something that I get to do in a more expansive way through the book. So the book is helping me be a teacher in a different way, in a way that my older self, shall I say, now that we're mid-age, my older self is really looking forward to doing more of. And so that's, yeah, yeah. Even if I'm not on the classroom stage as often as I have been.
I love that word expansive. I mean, that is such a another extra word to add in terms of the value of this community is you feel like a huge expansion
Mm-hmm.
when you feel like you need to contract and be less bright, less big and less bold.
Yeah, and expansion of people I don't know. I mean, the thing about being in the classroom is you see them again 3 days later. At this point, it's strangers. Like I am expansive to strangers, and that's the new territory. It's like, who are I don't know. And so, but it's an exciting point of connection when it's people who are coming out of the woodwork. You're like, there are people doing things all over the place that we never ever get to know about, and it connects you to them in that way. So that's been
Totally. Yeah, and I like I said, I never shared my penny loafer story with anybody. And then there were strangers, 20 strangers in the room. And then I just felt compelled to be like, we're all in this together, y'all. Ooh, I am an author. You know what I mean? Well, I am a human being with feelings. So there's something, there's an alchemy. You can't really explain it that happens on this journey.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie Cawthon. Thank you for being here today. Stephanie, tell us where we can find you and your work and how we can connect with you and learn more about. I know you're on LinkedIn in a very powerful way that I admire and respect.
So yeah, LinkedIn has become my early morning playground. I do think that it has a lot of important spaces that connect to what I'm doing. So that's important. My website, stephaniecawthon.com, has just gone through a whole new rethink, mostly because of this book. So this book has changed how I display my everything in the world. So that would be the other place to find me right now. Yeah.
All right. Well, we
Oh, I should
will.
say my newsletter. I would sign up for my newsletter because that's the most consistent way to get what's happening. Yeah.
Right. We will make sure to share that with everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you, Stephanie, for being trusting me and us on your journey as an author, starting in the very first cohort of your best-selling book, all the way to completion of not one, but two books, because you're a high achiever. So you got to have the book and the workbook. And I'm so excited for your audiobook. And thanks for being here today and talking about your journey. Bye, Stephanie. Thank you so much.